The big thing right now is storytelling, right? You have to be a great storyteller and you have to tell your origin story. When I say control, you want them to think they're in control every step of the way. You control it by asking the right questions at the right time with the right inflection, with the right body movement.
You work with founders and CEOs who dream of improving their brand awareness, their personal brand, to be more in the limelight. Where is the jumping off point? What is the mindset of the average founder when they come meet you? Where are they at a scale of 1 to 10 in the ability to be able to do this that resonates with an audience? Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest here. Steve, do you mind describing who you are, what you do, and how you serve the world?
Okay, I'm Steve Sapato, and I've been a speaker, an MC, and a small business coach, small business owner for 40 years. What I do is I help other small businesses grow and become the business that they really set into business for. So whether you're the head of a CEO of a company or whether you're somebody who's just starting a company, I can help you change what you're doing so that you make more money or get more results from what you're trying to achieve.
Pre-COVID, I spoke at 40 sales kickoffs, corporate events. They could have been sales and marketing conferences around the world. Took me to 45 countries.
Wow.
And that didn't begin by jumping off and speaking in front of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
It actually began by failing as the MC at my sister's wedding. So, you mix a couple Coronas and no speaking engagement experience, and it turns out you shit the bed.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing is I knew that I was also then going to be the MC to my brother's wedding the next year. I actually signed up for Podium Toastmasters, and I did an entire year in the basement of a church with your fellow Toastmasters. And I remember the first day where I watched people walk in the front door, and some people looked like they were accountants or they were very meek. And I thought, oh, these people are going to be disasters, but they were seasoned Toastmaster vets. And when you saw them go to the front of the stage and they used the T, one of the things they teach you is to walk on stage in the shape of a T, to command the stage.
Yeah.
And just their presence. And they were just so amazing at it. Anyways, long of the short, this was a learned behavior and a skill. So you work with founders and CEOs who dream of improving their brand awareness, their personal brand, to be more in the limelight. Where is the jumping off point? What is the mindset of the average founder when they come meet you? And where are they at a scale of 1 to 10 in the ability to be able to do this that resonates with an audience?
I would say they're probably 3. Almost all of them are just 3s. Now, here's the challenge. Everybody thinks they're a 10 when you talk to them. I don't care. I MC a thing here in my local area, and we get new speakers in every Monday morning who want to present to these stuff. And I ask them, how long you've been presenting? They go, several years. And I go, so you're good at it. And they bore you to death. They just learning how and there's a difference. There are people who are just boring presenters because they just want to talk about what they're going to give. I don't care if it's hearing aids or I don't care if it's Alka-Seltzer. They just want to tell you stuff. And that's the problem. You tell us stuff. You don't ask us. You don't involve us. You don't incorporate anything in that draws us into your talk. Then there are the people, and of course, the big thing right now is storytelling, right? You have to be a great storyteller, and you have to tell your origin story if you're a speaker. And the answer is no, you don't. What you want to do, and I invented a thing called storytizing. And what it does is it takes your talk, you put it into what I call your speaker blender. When you bring it out, it uses their memories, their emotions, their experiences to relate to the audience. And that's where most of the founders fall apart. Whether they get up for a 30-second elevator pitch in front of a group or they're getting up for a 25-minute presentation in front of their board of directors. One of the big challenges is they're boring. They don't know how to connect with that audience. They don't know how to make it real to them and involve them so that the people are actually leaning into, I want to learn more. That's the problem.
This is such valuable insights. My first book I wrote, Social Selling Mastery, the preface to the book is a story about a financial failure, the rise and fall of my first agency. And there's these funny anecdotes in it where the RCMP, I'm Canadian, gets involved, and there's the story around my wedding and basically the rise of the Phoenix and the transformation. The reason I tell this story for years and years on stage at the beginning of a sales conference is because the average seller has had massive ebbs and flows. There is no seller that has had the perfect ride. And there's no seller that wants to hear from somebody who says, like Alec Baldwin does in Glengarry Glen Ross, that they're only the best of the best. And, you know how much my watch is worth, that whole scene. Yeah. The reality is they want to hear that a human has had these peaks and troughs and gone through this, this journey. Can you describe for the audience, if you were to wireframe a story, how do you like to design the arc of stories? Or is there any tactical insights that you've used to help with connection with the audience?
I think the greatest challenge is you have to figure out what story you're going to relate to what audience. So finding the right story. We all have stories. Every one of us have stories of little failures, big failures. You can make little failures seem like big failures. Yeah. However you promote it, right? However you're going to speak about it. The greatest challenge, of course, is getting the people's attention to begin with. So you have to say something that's going to grab them, so make them go, I wonder what they're meaning by that, or I wonder how that happens, right? So you tell a story to start. You tell an anecdote to start with that grabs their attention, right? I remember. There was talk about. Toastmasters. They're one of the greatest Toastmaster things I've ever seen on, I'll say YouTube. I don't remember what it was at. But this guy walks out on stage and he's smoking a cigarette.
Yes, I've seen this one.
Yeah. And I mean, so you're immediately, as an audience, you're like, what in the world, right?
You can't smoke on stage. I've seen the same one.
And he had the audience from that second on, just had us. And so if you can find a way to grab the audience, whether it's a quick story, whether it's a great anecdote, whether it's a phrase, right, that gets their attention. And then you have to develop that into, like you say, so you got them here, you have to bring them here, but you have to keep them along the way. Somebody had a thing that years ago, decades ago, I remember, it's like, how often do you have to have interaction with your audience? And one of the guys said, well, you have to have one every minute. And I almost fell off my chair. One every minute. You know how badly you can bore somebody in a minute, right? So you have to have something about every 10 to 15 seconds, just a question. Something where you get people to nod. So you grab their attention. Then as you go along, you go, do you understand that? Or does that mean something to you? Or how do you think about that? And so we're all back into, how do I think about that? Right? Or raise your hand. Some people don't like to raise their hand. So if you use that type of thing, you have to be aware of that. But the biggest challenge for most people is to keep the audience involved. And that's what makes us boring. They call it death by PowerPoint, right? Which is all about you put too much stuff up on a PowerPoint presentation. Well, what's too much? And the answer to that is everything is too much. If I'm giving you a presentation, and even if I have like 50 things I have to present to my audience, you might put up all 50 for a few seconds, and then you take them down and you put up one. And then you talk about that one. But as soon as you start to talk about it, you bring that down, because here's what happens for most of us. If I leave that up, you might be looking at the background. My background fell apart the other day. I had to order a new one. But you might be looking at the background on my stuff, and you're wondering, oh, that's an interesting picture. Oh, look at those pictures. Hey, he plays the guitar.
You start to drift.
Stuff, that's right. All that stuff draws your attention. So if you've got one sentence on that screen behind you, they're going to keep reading that sentence and tune you out for as long as that's up there. So put that up there, take it down. Then you have control of the audience. And that's what your talk is all about. Everything you do to become a better speaker makes you better at sales, makes you better at leadership, makes you better at controlling a meeting. You have to be in control with your voice, with your inflections, with your gestures, with your movement. You said they're taught to walk on stage. They're taught to do that T. And simple things like that, because I say all the time, you're wandering the stage. There's no purpose in your movement to a lot of people. And I have a tendency, when I was younger, people said, were you a sailor when you were young? I went, no, why? And they went, because when I stand there, I sway. Don't ask me why I sway. I don't have
pace. I have a natural pace. Yeah.
And so you have to find out what's going to distract your audience and go from there. And so every single time you get up to do something, you want to make more money, then you have to learn how to control your audience. You want to sell more, you have to learn how to control, and I'll qualify this. You have to learn how to control the client. And when I say control, you want them to think they're in control every step of the way. You control it by asking the right questions at the right time with the right inflection, with the right body movement. It all changes the world for you.
Now, with a few minutes remaining, I think where a lot of founders are stuck is think of it as a moat or a ditch in front of them. They're standing here. They see any sort of speaking engagement just across the sand trap. They don't even care if it's free because they know speaking engagements that are free can lead to $1,000 payment opportunity, to a $10,000, to $100,000. It all starts with getting going.
That's right.
But how do you go from the average founder listening right now who says, I'm not being invited to speak at anything? If you were to give a few tactical tips, tricks, and tactics to go across that sand trap and get them involved and they could have their first speaking engagement, what would you do?
Wow. That's the toughest thing. Matter of fact, I was just working with somebody today. There's all kinds of speaking coaches out there, all kinds of them. And they all say, I can teach you how to be $1 million speaker. I can teach you how to be this. The answer is, great. You taught us how to be a great speaker. But almost none of them teach us how to get a job, right? None of them teach you the step from I'm a good speaker to I want to get paid. Yeah. And that's the greatest chasm that you were just talking about. It's when you were a kid. I remember being 16 years old going to a dance, and it was at a big thing. So everybody was there from all the schools around the region, and we were all there. And I saw this really good-looking woman, right? And I'm like, or girl, 16, 15, whatever she was. And it was like, she's only like 8 feet away, But do you walk over? Because, boy, you're facing all that rejection. And if you walk over, you know what your friends are going to say if you get rejected, right? So you have to be willing to face that rejection. So you have to, as a founder, you have the ability, and again, how you present yourself. Whenever you talk to somebody, you go, hey, when you do your meetings, do you ever have speakers come in? Right? Just ask the question. Hey, when you're doing your luncheon, do you ever have people come in and do a talk during your luncheon? When they say yes, you say, how would I get to be one of those? It's real simple. Now, almost never will they ask you then, well, what do you talk about? Because that's not how they develop it. Because most of the time when you're going for that lunch talk or that dinner talk, they just want somebody to entertain them. Now, be aware that entertain doesn't mean tell funny stories. You have to entertain in your style, in your voice, right?
Edutain or whatever.
Edutain. That's exactly right. That's what it is. But that's what it takes is you have to be willing to ask the question every time you meet somebody. So your job is to go out and meet people. Your job is to go to the Chamber of Commerce and say, hey, what do you do? Hey, they do this. You go, do you have monthly luncheons or do you have monthly dinners? And find out if they say yes. You say, do you have speakers who come in? Then just pursue that because that's your responsibility to get in front of more people so that more people see you. And I tell the story all the time. The first time I ever spoke was I worked at IBM as a salesman, and my mom called me up and she said, hey, my speaker canceled for tonight. She did women's groups. And I went, I'm sorry, Mom, that's too bad. She went, no, you don't understand. I need a speaker. I went, I don't know any speakers. And she said, no, you don't understand. You're my speaker.
You are the speaker.
Yeah. And you don't tell your mom no. Yeah, so definitely. I went, okay, I'm a salesman, but I'm not a speaker. I said, what do you want to talk about? She said, I don't care. Oh, what does that mean, right? I could talk about anything I wanted. Well, so that kicked it off. And I tell people all the time, for almost 2 years, I talked for food. That was my deal. For 4 years, I talked for food because I found out I really liked talking for that 20 minutes and entertaining the people. But I didn't get paid. And then one day somebody said, how much do you charge? I went, charge? Right? How much is the card? And so then I said, well, how about $50? Well, now you learn that there's also a style, a thing you have to learn on how much you're going to charge people, right? And I tell the story all the time. I was working for one company, and the lady said, hey, I got a great opportunity. They're putting on a big event, and they want a speaker, so we're going to go over and present. I went, okay. And on the way over, I said, well, how big is this event? She said, they're going to have 400 or 500 people in the audience. I went, oh, I said, so what do we charge? About $5,000? And she lost control of the car. She was like, oh, my gosh, no. Now, I'm in Moline, Illinois, right? Davenport, Iowa. And she was like, no, oh my gosh, no. I went, what do you mean, no? More? And she went, well, you can't charge that kind of money. And I went, oh, interesting. So we went in. I talked to her. I went, yeah, I don't speak for less than $5,000. That's why I brought that up to you, And she was like, we can't charge that much. So I said, well, I'm just telling you, I won't speak for less than $5,000. And we got in. We sat in there, and they said, well, how much how much will you charge her for this? She said $1,500, and I almost fell off my chair. I was like, and I just looked at him. I'm not saying anything, but I knew when I got back in the car, I was going to tell her, I don't know who you're hiring, but I'm not doing it, because that was what I had told her already. Long story short, they didn't hire us, and it turns out they didn't hire us because how good could you be for $1,500? So you have to learn to ask the right questions, and she had never been exposed to that before. What she should have done is given away to the knowledge of the person who was already doing it and said, when they come to that question, why don't you be in charge of that? I go, great, right? Because then you ask, what's your budget? What were you thinking of paying, right? What did you pay your last presenter? Those kind of things that people give real good information about. So when you're talking about moving from the open chasm of first I got to get the job, do a few of them. Always record yourself speaking. Get a tripod and a phone and one of those little lavalier microphones that are attached right here. So because the biggest thing is audio is the problem almost all the time when you're listening back. Always record yourself speaking. Listen to it back. Watch it back. Improve yourself. So every time you speak, you can get better and not be boring.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for being on Outsource to Profits. Contact information, how do people get a hold of you?
SteveSapatoSeminars.com. So go to SteveSapatoSeminars.com. You'll find all kinds of good stuff there. You can write to me. You can call me, 563-370-4938. I love to get texts from people who have questions about how to improve what they're doing. 563-370-4938 or SteveSapatoSeminars.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
And my pleasure.